In this section, I will be looking at IPsec. IPsec is used to authenticate and encrypt data. This provides both privacy for your connections and also confirms you are communicating with the correct party. In this video, I will first look at what is IPsec. With security becoming so important nowadays, IPsec is an important protocol to understand. Next, I will look at the improvements to IPsec that Windows Server 2008 has to offer over earlier editions of Windows. Next, I will look at what a security association is. A security association is essential to the settings IPsec will use. Next, I will look at the protocols used in IPsec. There are a few different protocols that make up IPsec, and it is important to understand what each of these protocols does. IPsec also has two different modes that it runs in. When troubleshooting IPsec, it is important to understand how these modes operate. Next, I will look at types of connections. Windows allows you to create a number of different connection types depending on your needs. IPsec for Windows also supports a number of different authentication methods. In a Windows environment, you should be able to accept the defaults, but if you are connecting to IPsec devices on the network, you may need to fine-tune these settings. Lastly, I will look at deploying IPsec on your network using group policy. Using group policy allows you to set up all your computers on your network quickly rather than having to configure each one individually. Originally, with IP version 4, there was no security built in. Back in those days, there was not as much emphasis on security as there is today. To provide security for Internet communications, IPsec was developed. IPsec's standards for Internet protocol security and its suite of protocols are designed for securing IP communications. IPsec was an add-on to IP version 4, but with IP version 6 it has been included as a native part of the protocol. Using IPsec, you can provide communication between your clients and your server, between servers, and finally, network to network. The aim is to provide reliable, secure communication. It does this by providing authentication. That is, being able to prove each party is who they say they are. This stops a hacker from impersonating a server in order to get information, such as usernames and passwords. Authentication also allows the server to confirm the client is a real client and not a hacker. IPsec prevents eavesdropping. This is the monitoring of your communication by a third party. With IPsec, the information is encrypted, which makes it impossible for a hacker to use the data. One form of attack a hacker may use is recording your communication and then playing it back at a later date. This is called a replay attack. If a hacker were able to record the initial authentication sequence at the start of a communication, they could replay this message and add their own data. With IPsec, replay attacks are impossible. Even if you sent the same data in a different session, the communication sequence used by IPsec will be completely different and only valid in that one session. This also applies to data tampering. Data tampering is when data is added, removed, or changed in a communication stream. IPsec can detect if the data stream has been altered in any way and thus prevents data tampering attacks. With Windows Server 2008, there have been a lot of improvements to IPsec. First, IPsec has now been integrated with the Windows Firewall. Integrating IPsec with the Windows Firewall makes IPsec a lot easier to configure. To understand why, consider this. Your computer is on a network and has its firewall up and running. A virus attempts to connect to your computer. The virus is blocked by your firewall. This prevents your computer from getting infected. You later make an IPsec connection to a remote network to access a server. The port used by IPsec is allowed through the firewall. The virus infects a computer on the remote network and then attempts to access your computer via the IPsec connection. Since the firewall has added the IPsec connection through the firewall, any data sent via IPsec is sent straight to your computer, bypassing the firewall. Your computer is now infected with the virus. The firewall has not been able to stop the virus since the virus went over the same port as IPsec. To solve this problem, IPsec is now integrated with the Windows Firewall. This means any data traveling over an IPsec connection will still need to pass through the Windows Firewall. The virus in this example, when it attempts to go over the IPsec connection, would have been blocked. Previously, to configure Windows Firewall to work with IPsec was a very difficult task. Now that IPsec is integrated with the Windows Firewall, it is very easy to configure IPsec connections that still allow or block any port that you decide. With IPsec for Windows Server 2008 also comes support for IP version 6. With Windows Server 2008, you can quickly and easily set up an IPsec connection between computers using IP version 6. Next, IPsec integrates with NAP. NAP, or Network Access Protection, is a system that makes sure that your network is safe by performing health checks on computers. If the computer does not pass its health check, the computer will have updates installed on it until it is up to date. IPsec can now use NAP certificates to provide encryption and authentication. If you are using a high availability solution, IPsec offers improvements to load balancing and clustering support. Lastly, IPsec has more encryption algorithms. This helps Windows connect to different devices on the network. Remember, IPsec is an open standard, so a lot of non-Microsoft devices on the market use IPsec. When dealing with IPsec, you may see the term Security Association, or SA, appear from time to time. An SA is simply a logical group of security parameters, for example, the algorithms used. Windows will have certain algorithms enabled by default, but you can add more. You will find that if you are trying to connect to a device, for example, a VPN device, that device will also support certain algorithms. The two devices will negotiate with each other and agree on the algorithms to use. The SA will also contain the key sizes. Certain devices will support certain key sizes. Depending on your needs, you may want to adjust the key sizes. Larger key sizes give better encryption, but also mean more CPU time is used to generate the communication. For two hosts to communicate, they need to agree on a common SA. If your hosts can't agree on an SA, IPsec communication will not be successful. There are a number of protocols used in IPsec to provide communication. The first is Internet Key Exchange, or IKE. IKE is used to transfer SA parameters between the hosts. It also handles negotiation of protocols between the two hosts and generation of keys. The next protocol is Authentication Header, or AH. If you use the AH protocol, you can use it for host and client authentication. It also supports data integrity and prevents replay attacks. The big limitation of AH is it does not support encryption, and thus it is possible for a third party to eavesdrop on communications. AH does not support NAT. If your communication needs to travel through a NAT device, you will need to use Encapsulating Security Payload, or ESP protocol. This protocol does the same thing as AH protocol and supports data encryption. You may be thinking, why would you even bother with the AH protocol? Why not use the ESP protocol? To understand why both protocols are used, you need to understand a little bit more about how IPsec works. IPsec uses two modes of communication. The first is main mode. In order to make sure each party is who they say they are and also make sure that the communications cannot be decrypted, large keys should be used along with a strong algorithm. These algorithms are time-consuming and CPU-intensive. Once both parties are verified, main mode is used to establish a secure connection between the two parties to help configure quick mode. Keys for quick mode can be transferred to each party using main mode. Since the setup for quick mode is secure, faster algorithms and smaller keys can be used. You will also notice that communication is performed in quick mode and not in main mode. For this reason, often AH is used for main mode if it is used at all. AH does not support encryption, but this is not a problem since communication is not performed in main mode, only authentication. For quick mode, ESP is often used. ESP provides encryption for your traffic. Thus, main mode authenticates the two parties and transfers keys for quick mode. Quick mode is used to transfer data between the hosts using smaller keys and a weaker algorithm. Using this kind of system is a good compromise on performance versus security. A lot of CPU time is used to confirm that the hosts are who they say they are and to transfer keys between them. Once complete, less CPU time is needed for the communication. In order for an attacker to decrypt the often weaker quick mode algorithm and key size, they would still need to decrypt the strong main mode algorithm to gain access to the keys. As you can see, using this method saves you a lot of CPU time as well as gives you good security. You may be thinking, could I use ESP for main mode or AH for quick mode or any combination in between? The answer is yes. AH is often used for main mode and ESP for quick mode, but these algorithms can be applied to either mode. Just remember, if you do decide to use AH for quick mode, your communication will not be encrypted. As you can see, there are a lot of things you need to know in order to understand IPsec. There are still some more details to go through, but before I do that, I will perform a quick demo of how to create an IPsec connection between two computers. This will help you understand the fundamentals of IPsec a little better before I move on. In this demo, I'm going to create an IPsec connection between two computers using the Windows Firewall with Advanced Security tool. With Windows Server 2008, IPsec has been embedded into the firewall to provide better security and make it easier to make IPsec connections. First of all, I need to open Windows Firewall with Advanced Security from the Start menu. If I select the option Connection Security Rules, this section is used to configure IPsec. To create a new connection, right-click on Connection Security Rules and select New Rule. The first screen allows you to determine the type of connection. I will cover connection types in more detail later on. In this example, I will choose the default Isolation Rule. This type essentially means if you don't meet the criteria for the connection will not be allowed. In other words, you will be isolated. On the next screen, the first option requests the use of IPsec for inbound and outbound connections. If IPsec is not available, then clear text communication will be used. The next option requires IPsec for inbound connection and requests IPsec for outbound connections. If IPsec is not available for the outbound connection, then clear text is used, but inbound connections must use IPsec. The last option always requires that IPsec be used for inbound and outbound connections. In this case, I will accept the default. On the next screen, you need to decide which type of authentication system will be used. In this case, I will use the default, which is Kerberos. On this screen, you can select which firewall profiles this connection rule will apply to. For example, you may only want to use IPsec when connected to a public network. It would be best to use IPsec for all communications when possible, but in the real world, this puts more load on your servers. If your servers cannot handle the extra workload, maybe you should consider using IPsec for high-risk profiles only. Lastly, you need to enter in a name for the connection. Press Finish, and the new connection will be created. If I select Monitoring and then select Connection Security Roles, you can see the new rules that I have created. To monitor more details about the connection, select Security Associations and expand it. Here you can see the sections Main Mode and Quick Mode. If I select Main Mode, you will notice at present there is nothing in there. This is because no IPsec connections have been created. I have a Windows 7 computer on the network configured to use IPsec. If I open a command prompt and ping the Windows 7 computer, you will notice that I don't receive a reply from that other computer. This is because the Windows 7 firewall is blocking the return ping. If I switch back to the admin tool, you will notice that after I refresh the view, I now have a connection under main mode. Even though I did not get a response back from the ping, sending the ping was enough to establish the connection. In older versions of Windows, if the ping command traveled over an IPsec connection, you would have received a response back from the ping command, even though the firewall may be set to block pings. This is the advantage of having IPsec integrated with the firewall. All traffic must still pass through the firewall and be subject to its rule list. If I select the properties for the connection, you will notice that I can get some more information about the connection. This includes the encryption used and also the integrity algorithm used. Notice in this particular case, there is no algorithm used for key exchange. Since Kerberos was used, there is no need to use a key exchange algorithm. Remember that IPsec connections are in two phases, so if I now select Quick Mode, you will also notice the second stage of the connection. If I select Properties, I can get some more information about the connection. You will notice that AH integrity is set to none, and ESP integrity is set to SHA-1. Remember, ESP includes encryption, so is a better choice for Quick Mode than AH, which is only authentication. If you are having problems with your connections, check Main Mode and Quick Mode. This will help you troubleshoot problems, especially when connecting to other devices. It is not uncommon for main mode to connect but quick mode to fail. All it takes is for the other device to not support a particular algorithm and quick mode will fail. Checking these sections may give you a hint to what the problem may be. Windows supports a number of different IPsec connection rules. First, there is isolation. This restricts connections based on authentication criteria. The criteria could be, for example, if the computer is a member of the domain. If the authentication criteria is successful, the IPsec connection is brought up. Using this rule, you could isolate computers that are part of your domain from computers that are not part of your domain or standalone. The next rule is authentication exemption. This rule allows you to specify computers that are exempt from having to authenticate. Examples of computers that you may use this rule on are domain controllers and certificate authorities. To authenticate a connection, these servers may need to be accessed first. If you denied access to these kinds of servers, it may be impossible for the IPsec connection to be created. The next connection type is server to server. The main difference between this connection and the others is that you can enter in your own endpoint or points. As the name suggests, you could make a connection between two servers by entering the IP addresses of the servers. However, the rule also allows you to connect a subnet together, a group of computers, or a list of IP addresses. The last connection rule is tunnel. When you use this rule, tunnel mode is used for IPsec rather than transport mode. Tunnel mode will embed the IPsec packet in an IP packet. The IP packet is then routed through the network like a normal packet. If you are having issues with your IPsec packet going through your network, you may need to use a tunnel. Once you have decided which type of connection you are going to use, you will need to use some kind of authentication on the connection. Windows supports 4 different types of authentication for IPsec. First, there is Kerberos. Kerberos works only on computers in the domain. For this reason, you can set the connection to authenticate based on the computer or the computer and the user. You cannot authenticate based on just the username. If you want to authenticate computers that are not part of your domain, you may want to consider using certificates. All the target computer needs to do is trust the certificate authority that is issuing the certificates to make the IPsec connection. Certificates may also be issued by NAP in the form of health certificates. If the computer passes the NAP health test and it is issued a health certificate, the health certificate can then be used to access other computers on the network. Using the health certificates, you can prevent your computers from accessing the network until they have met the minimum health requirements, except for servers they need to access to obtain updates to meet the health checks. The next authentication type is NTLM version 2. This is the system of authentication used by Windows before Kerberos. Kerberos relies on a trust relationship which is created when a computer is joined to a domain. If your computer is in a workgroup, then you may need to use NTLM. You may also need to use NTLM if a firewall is blocking Kerberos. Finally, if all else fails, you can use a pre-shared key. A pre-shared key is a very weak method of authentication and not recommended. In some cases, you may need to use a pre-shared key. For example, if you are accessing an old network device that only supports pre-shared keys. To start configuring your computers, you can configure them manually. However, in a large network, you will want to use group policy. The IPsec settings for group policy can be found under Computer Settings, Policies, Window Settings, and then Security Settings. There are 2 places you can set IPsec settings. The first is Windows Firewall with Advanced Security. You will find that the Windows Firewall with Advanced Security is an easy way to set up IPsec connections in your domain, but not as powerful. To configure it, the same wizard is used as the admin tool. You also have the option to use IP security policies on Active Directory if you want more options. To use these group policy settings is a little more complex because you need to set up 3 different configurations before you can configure a connection. First, you need to create a filter action. The filter action will determine what will happen when the criteria is met. Next, you need to create a filter list. The filter list determines which computers or devices this rule will apply to. Lastly, you need to create a rule. The rule will use the filter list and the filter action to create an IPsec rule, which will be used to build your IPsec connections. Let's have a look at how to create a group policy for IPsec. To set up a new group policy, run Group Policy Management from the Start menu under Administrative Tools. From Group Policy Management, expand down to the domain, right-click it, and select Create New GPO and link it here. Once I give the group policy a name, it will be created. I can now right-click on it and press Edit. In this case, I'm going to create an IPsec connection through the Windows Firewall. To do this, I need to expand down to Windows Firewall with Advanced Security and then down further to Connection Security Rules. If I right-click Connection Security Rules, I have the option to create a new rule. You will notice the same wizard will appear as it did when I created the rule using the Windows Firewall Admin tool. On this screen, you can select which type of connection you would like to make. To show you all the available options, I will select Custom. On this screen, you can enter in which IP addresses you want this rule to apply to. In this particular case, I will leave it on the default, which is all IP addresses. On the next screen, I will set authentication to For All Connections. Since I want to secure Telnet, I want to make sure IPsec is always used. On the next screen, I can set what type of authentication I wish to use. In this case, I will select Advanced and then press the Customize button to show you all the different options there are. On the Advanced screen, you can set up additional authentication methods which are normally not available. For example, if I select the Add button on the left-hand side, you will notice I have a few options that were not available before. Kerberos was available in the wizard, but NTLM version 2 was not available. Selecting this will use the NTLM Challenge Response Authentication Protocol. This protocol was used before the Windows 2000 Kerberos authentication system was introduced. This protocol is weaker than Kerberos, but there are some scenarios you may want to use it for. For example, if one of the computers is not part of the domain. If you have a firewall between the computers, Kerberos may get blocked by the firewall. If you are unable to change the settings on the firewall, a workaround may be to use NTLM authentication. The next option is certificates. If you have a certificate authority or CA on your network, you may want to consider using it to supply certificates for your IPsec connections. Certificates contain digital keys which are used by IPsec. If you're using NAP, you can select the option Only Accept Health Certificates. If the computer passes all the tests that NAP requires, the computer will be allocated a health certificate that it can use for IPsec. If you select the option Enable Certificate to Account Mapping, this means the certificate will be stored in Active Directory. Windows will retrieve the certificate from Active Directory and use it to make the IPsec connection. The last option, Use a Pre-Shared Key, allows you to enter in your own passphrase for the connection. Both computers must have the same passphrase for the connection to work. This method is not recommended as it is the least secure of all the methods. In this case, I will select Kerberos as all my computers are in a domain. You will notice that if I press Add again, I can enter in another authentication method. In this case, I will select NTLM. In this case, when main mode of the IPsec connection is being set up, authentication will be attempted with Kerberos, and then, if that fails, NTLM will be used. Notice also, I have the option First Authentication is optional. If I select this, then if both authentication modes listed fail, the connection will still be allowed. Ticking this option essentially allows you to have anonymous connections. In the second authentication method, I can again add a single authentication method or more than one if I wish. Notice also I have the option to make the second authentication method optional. Make sure you don't tick first and second authentication as optional for both. If you do this, authentication is effectively switched off. Moving on to the next screen, I can set the protocol used. In this case, I want to set the rule up for Telnet, which is TCP, and port number 23. On the next screen, I can again set which firewall profile I want to use, finally set the name for the connection. For a basic IPsec connection, this works well, but if you want more options, you will need to use IP security on Active Directory. I select IP security on Active Directory, right-click on it, and select Manage IP Filter Lists and Filter Actions. If I now select the Manage Filter Actions, you will notice here the default filter actions that are configured. If you want to add your own actions, press the Add button. Once you have entered in a name, you can select the action behavior. You can select Permit or Block for the action or the option Negotiate Security. If I select Negotiate Security, on the next screen I can decide what to do if an unsecure connection cannot be established. The next screen determines the type of integrity and encryption used. The first option, Integrity and Encryption, uses ESP to encrypt the data and for authentication. The second option uses the AH algorithm, which does not provide encryption. In this case, I will use the first option since I want my traffic encrypted. Once you have your action created, or you are happy to use the defaults, select Manage IP Filters Lists. Press the Add button to add your own list. In this example, I want to match only Telnet traffic. Notice that I have the option mirrored. This option will match packets going in both directions, allowing you to have two-way communication. On the next screen, you can specify the source IP address. Notice in the pull-down list that you have a lot of options, including DNS name, and you can even specify a subnet. In this case, I will select any IP address. The destination IP address I will also leave as any IP address. For the protocol, you will notice I have a big choice of protocols. In this particular case, I will select TCP. On this screen, I can enter in a port number. In this case, I want all connections to go to port 23, which is Telnet, to be secure. So I will enter in port 23 in the To Port field. I have now created a filter in my filter list. I could add additional filters to the list if I wished. Now both the filter list and the filter action have been created. I can now create a policy. Right-click IP Security Policies on Active Directory and select Create IP Security Policy. Once you enter in a name of the new policy, you will be taken to a legacy screen. If you have old clients like Windows 2003 and Windows XP, you will need to tick this option. This option will allow Windows to respond to the client security request if no other rules match. The next is similar to the Advanced Firewall Wizard authentication options. You can again select Kerberos, certificates, or a pre-shared key. I will just accept the default Kerberos. Once I press Finished, I will have the option to edit the properties. You will notice only the default response rule for older editions of Windows is present. If I press Add, I can now add the filter list and action that I created earlier. The first option allows you to set up a tunnel. In this particular case, I don't need a tunnel, so I will not enable it. On the next screen, I can select which network connections I want to use. By default, it will apply to all network connections, which, in this case, is what I want. On the Filter List screen, you can see the Telnet filter that I selected earlier. On the next screen, I can select the action, which is the action I created earlier, which is Require Security for All Connections. Once again, I can set the authentication options. I will leave it to the default of Kerberos. Once I press Finish, the new policy is created. This will require all Telnet connections to use IPsec. Telnet uses clear text usernames and passwords. Having this policy enabled will ensure that data is encrypted when it is transferred over the network. IP security policy for Active Directory is harder to set up than Windows Firewall with advanced security, but it does allow you to customize the connection more than the Windows Firewall connection wizard allows. If you decide to use IPsec or when you are studying for your exam, remember AH provides integrity and authentication. ESP provides integrity, authentication, and encryption. Your needs will determine which algorithm you will choose. If you have used IPsec in previous editions of Windows, you will find that now that it is integrated in with the Windows firewall, it is much easier to administer and set up than ever before.